Excited to chat with you all today about ministry partner development. I might default and call it fundraising at times. Same thing. We're really talking about doing ministry with people that are there to support you, not only through prayer, but also through financial support and just encouragement. And so we want to talk about that. Before we talk about that, I know that part of your pre-MOT work was to watch a video on vision statements. John mentioned that last time. So we're going to spend a few minutes, and I'm going to share my screen here. We're going to spend a few minutes talking about vision statements, which is really what things have you all come up with as far as your vision statements. Draghi was brave and shared his last time. And what I want to talk about now is anybody else brave enough to share theirs and walk us through what that would look like, and then we can talk about it as a group. I have put these 5 keys to casting a clear vision on my screen as well, for the purpose of being able to comment on things as we talk through them together. So anybody brave enough to share their vision or a revised vision with the group?
We are 4 with the same vision as Draghi's before, because we are a team.
Yep.
But however, ours is raising up new generations of Christ-led students so that the gospel goes to the ends of the world.
Okay, so raising up, walk me through it one more time. I'm going to try to catch the high points here.
Okay, so it is raising up new generations of Christ-led leaders so that the gospel goes to the ends of the world.
Okay, raising up new generation of Christ-like leaders so the gospel goes to ends of the world. By the way, that is a secret for those of you, and most of you fit into this category. Fernando, you're the only one who doesn't fit into this category. Feel free to still the vision of the group that you're with. Use the same vision. Not only is it going to help you be together as a group, but it also makes your assignment easier. So Kat and Blake, secret idea there. Just go on GSS website and grab their vision, and you got this figured out already. Anybody else want to share their vision?
So for mine, I kind of use parts of GSF, but since we're solely like the MK school, I kind of simplified it a little bit and just did empowering families to minister through education and care.
Okay, empowering families to minister through education and care. Mm-hmm. One of the things I like so far about both that have been shared is that they are fairly straightforward language. So I'll offer an example. I used to work with a client who did majority of feeding work, Care International. They, worked in refugee camps, etc. And they had a vision statement that was something along the lines. I don't remember it exactly, but I'll give you the example. Empowering women to work through their families and communities to create sustainable, life-saving solutions. Now, you hear that and you think, those are some big words. I'm not sure exactly what they mean. What I'd love to hear them say is working with women to help them feed their families and communities. Because in reality, that's what they were actually doing, but they were putting big words to it. So one of the things I want to say about the first 2 that were shared there is it's fairly straightforward English language, and it's not confusing to people. So want to make sure that is part of your vision. If you get to a part where you say, like, what does that word mean? Or there's some secret knowledge that's involved to understand what that word means in my community, then drop that. But I didn't hear that in either of those first 2, so well done. Fernando, I'm going to put you on the spot because you're really the only last one who hasn't, assuming Kat's going to share Blake's vision.
Yeah, I can. Mine is short, and I think I shared on Tuesdays, to empower leaders to reach the unreached and plant churches.
Again, fairly straightforward. You can tell that all of you on this call have been on the field or deeply ingrained in the work that you're thinking about going to. So I think that is a benefit of several of you already being in the work, is you get a clear sense of what that actually looks like. So very straightforward and clear language. You can see these 5 keys on the slide. Focus on results, not your strategies, to speak to people's hearts. So think about outcomes. What happens when the donor gives? What happens if you succeed? We're gonna see that in a couple other places as we go forward. Leave the ministry language at home. If you find that and this is enticing to missionaries, if you find that your language is heavily church-centric and that anybody who doesn't go to church won't understand it, make sure that you back away from that, because you want to be able to share it even with people who may not share the exact same church culture with you. Leave room in the vision for them. We talked about that on Tuesday in John's presentation. Oh, don't talk as if you're the only thing. You're not the only solution. Obviously, God needs to join you in this work. You probably have teammates who are joining you in this work. You have other nonprofits or parachurch organizations in your region who are probably working on this. Don't make it sound like it's just on your shoulders. And the focus shouldn't be on you. This differentiates from number 4 in the sense that it's not just about you and the things you are going to accomplish. It's really about what the donor is going to help you accomplish. Any questions on the vision as you heard each other? Is there any feedback to what you heard from one another?
Greg, when we, for example, we have a very clear and short vision, would be the case that sometimes the person you're sharing with ask you to kind of expand a little more, and then you have the freedom to give more details, like to empower. They may ask, what do you mean by that? You're training them, you're supporting them, so we give that clear vision, but there is room for expansion if people request, right?
Absolutely. That's one of the cool things about vision statements that I love, is you're attempting to offer them just enough to get them a sense of what you're about and to get interested in, but it allows them to ask questions to move forward. Fernando, I'll touch on one other point about what you asked about. Let's say that every time you share the word empower, people say, what does that mean? You might at that point consider going back and trying to find a different word to replace it if it's consistent. It could be that a certain word is going to trip everybody up and you need to go back and say, oh, let me replace that with a different word to make it more clear. But generally, your vision statement will lead to questions and it will lead to stories. So we're going to talk about that later in our time together, but it needs to lead to some stories as well and give you room to expound upon exactly what you're doing. Well, I'm going to move us forward, since you all did such a good job sharing your vision. I'm going to move us forward to our goal of our time together this morning for our first session, which is the who and how of setting up those ministry partner one-on-one meetings. So you see this screen in front of you. The reality is that we're all going to be on Zoom most likely for these ministry partner meetings that we would love to have in person, but that won't be our reality for most of us. Kat, you might be the only one who's probably going to get away with that, with a family member or two, if they're willing to let you come over, but the rest of us are going to be stuck on Zoom for this. So the who and how of this. So we're going to talk a little bit about, the first thing we're going to talk about is the who. By show of hands, when you got the request from us and Allie to put together a list of 200 ministry partners into the spreadsheet, how many of you felt like this poor little guy? You thought, oh no, how will I do that? Okay, so a few hands, Emily included. Kat, yeah. So what we want to spend some time on here, and you are all actually going to help us lead this, so be prepared. You guys are all going to become leaders in how to think through this. We want to spend the next 20 minutes or so discussing, where do we get these lists from? What kind of categories are we thinking through? So I'm going to have Becky put up a poll for us to find out exactly how you're all feeling about these ministry partner lists. What I want you to do when you get the poll is to answer, of the 5 choices, how are you feeling about this list? Ranking from great all the way to I don't think I even know 200 people. Okay, we got some answers coming in. Becky, I'll let you keep us posted on the update. I'm not, for some reason, I just quit sharing my screen because I couldn't actually see the Zoom screen.
Got it. That might be all that's answering actually, because we have a few of us extras on the call. So we have 8 people that have answered. So I'm going to end the poll and share this. Greg, can you see it now on your side?
I can indeed. And I actually joined the group in the middle. This should be interesting because Becky and I do minimal fundraising for our role here at Global Outreach for travel and support and a little bit of salary payback. And even I myself, thinking about that, thought, we haven't gotten anywhere near 200 because we have a smaller goal. But my hope is from this time is that some of us will move from the middle, this should be interesting, to at least the fine, that's a lot, but I know people, I'm not sure any of us are probably going to get to 2,000 if we're feeling this at the moment. So good to know where we all stand. We're all in a similar boat in that middle section. And we hope to offer you some advice today on how to do this. So what we want to do for the next 10 minutes or so is I'm actually going to break us into breakout groups. Becky's going to break us out into breakout groups. You're going to be groups of 3 to 4 each. And your assignment here is using the pre-MOT assignment that was in the email, brainstorming for partners. If any of you have done that work, you are going to be ultimately prepared for this breakout session. You will be able to lead your group because you've thought through this. Consider groups of ministry partner audiences that you can reach out to. So I'm going to give a couple obvious ones and not steal the hard ones. Church members, people you go to church with. That's a pretty obvious group of people you should be and could be talking to about this. Your family might be one. That's another pretty obvious one. Especially if you live in a family of believers or have people in your life that are part of your family who would support this work, maybe that's another category. But start to name in your group in the next several minutes types or groups and classifications of people. Some of them are going to be more complex. You can get creative. Hopefully that assignment started you down this path a little bit, but if not, I want you to spend time in groups outlining that. We also want you to have a person assigned when you come back. So just like a couple days ago, when you come back, have a spokesperson for your group who's going to tell us the categories, because what we're going to do is we're actually going to type them into a PowerPoint so that when we finish this, all of the ideas that you all came up with, and some that I'll add if we don't get them, will be in a PowerPoint. You can reference them to work forward from. Is that assignment clear for the next 10 minutes? Everybody feeling good about that? Okay. We'll break you into groups.
Okay, I think it should be sending you now.
Found some more peeps in here too. That's funny. And it's recording.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you all came up with the answers because we're going to rely on you for the answers. But who are our two representatives who are going to help list out what you all came up with? See Blake and Crimmy. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to share my screen again. I'm not going to go into presentation mode in my PowerPoint. We're just going to pull it up on screen. And I'm actually just going to type in, as you all answer these, Blake and Crimmy, I'm going to type in what categories we came up with. So Blake, do you want to go first?
Sure. So we kind of talked about our ministries a little bit and then came up with, so our gym or somewhere you work out.
Yep.
Church, extended family, friends, friends of friends, student families that you've taught or been connected with. And that's about as far as we got.
So walk me through what I missed. I didn't keep up with you there, Blake. What else do we have that you mentioned that we don't have here?
Friends or friends of friends.
Okay.
And then I think you got it all. Church, family, extended family.
Okay. Good job. Good job. Good job. We'll add in some as well as we go, but good job, Blake. Crimmy, over to you. What did your group come up with?
So Facebook or other social media contacts.
Okay. I like that.
High school friends. Small group from church or Bible study, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And even friends who are not believers but really know what we're about.
Yep. So I'll put non-believing friends.
Mm-hmm. That's what we came up with.
Okie dokie. Great. Good job, team. Coming up with those. That non-believing friends is a key one. You'll still be able to find people who may not have the same gospel-centered mindset you were, but that will share common interests. So I always like to say Becky's brother-in-law and sister were missionaries in Uganda. Dave, Becky's brother-in-law, his dad was an atheist, but gave heavily to their ministry in both Ethiopia and Uganda. So don't ever limit the power of the Holy Spirit to work in people who care about you, and even if they don't maybe align with exactly what your vision is.
Can I add a few?
Absolutely. We'd love that.
College friends, just thinking of who I already have on my donator list. Professors, like previous professors.
Yep.
Local companies.
Yep.
And then that's all I have. But yeah, most of my supporters are actually non-believers, which I find kind of cool.
That's really cool. What about anybody else from either the missionary groups, MOT groups, or staff are invited as well? What other categories can you all think of to help us fill this in?
Previous employers.
Okay. Previous employers. Again, the goal, finding people with like-mindedness especially.
And friends of our parents.
I'm also going to say coworkers as well, Emily.
Good deal.
Yes, friends of your parents. We are all enough of an age group that I will note that one of the things we know is that donors tend to be older. So donors tend to be, at least in the United States, demographically 70 plus. So think about that, 70 plus. Some of you, that's probably not even your parents. That's probably your grandparents and older. So as you sit with your friends in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, recognize that they care about you. Many of them will likely give to you, but they are not the demographic who tends to have income that they could, disposable income that they can dedicate to causes like that. That tends to happen in your 65, 70 plus age range. So be thinking about friends of your parents, friends of your grandparents that would care about your ministry, because those people are very generous. What else? Any other categories?
People that you've served with in the past. I've gotten to support some of my friends that I've served with previously and continue that, and vice versa. People that have served in the past that have supported me later on down the road.
I like that. Like-minded folks who are on similar journeys. I will add in neighbors, because I think through my neighbors, not only currently, but past neighbors growing up in neighborhoods, still connected with several of them on social media. What other groups? Any other groups?
I would just say, Greg, with church, there's I don't know, for us in the States, it was the church I grew up in, the church my parents went to now, the church Emily and I went to together as a married couple, the church that she grew up in, the church and the people I interacted with in college, but through church. There were a lot of churches. I'm beginning to think maybe I don't stick around long enough in a church, but there's a lot of churches, and that's people wanting to be involved with missions.
Yep, both current and past churches.
Maybe people from some mission projects that we spent with some people.
Yep.
Yeah, eventually, Greg, it'd be short-term team members. Eventually.
Yep.
Something what I was doing during one of my times in the United States, I went out of contacts and I just typed it like a nearby church, and I contact the church and I introduced myself that I'm missionary and went in the church, meet a lot of people and get some support.
Yep, that's great. I love that. Again, like-minded people, and you're going to find those in a lot of churches, obviously, being missionaries. I'll add a couple more here just to round out the list that I have in front of us. Think about what I would call your service community, your doctor, maybe your auto mechanic, your barber, accountant. Maybe you have a Christian bookstore that you shop at. Those aren't existing as much anymore, at least in the United States, but maybe you still have one. Your babysitter, banker. Are there people that you're just around in a social service community that you could add in there? So think about your dentist. I had a dentist back in Seattle area when we lived there who is a strong Christian believer. I had been in small groups with him before, so maybe that's one of those other ones. The other one you could think of would be, at least in the United States, and I'm assuming that these probably exist in other groups, would be clubs or civic groups. So these for the United States would be groups like the Kiwanis or Lions Club. These are groups that get together on an ongoing basis, and many of them have service projects and charitable causes that they need to donate to as part of their core bylaws. So I'll be sure to that. I'm going to add the last one if it will let me. Oh, look at that. The magic of PowerPoint. When you run out of space, it just shrinks everything. I'm going to add referrals. Alex, I believe it was on you on Tuesday who mentioned this, maybe it was you, Draghi, about asking for people you're meeting with, who else you could meet with. So that is always a vital component of this. You all did a great job. Well done to all of you for coming up with a great list. We are going to save this PowerPoint to Facebook. You can reference back to this. I hope that this helped you start to think of new categories that you can look at your list and start to add to. Grab contacts. Emily was sharing in our staff breakout that John at one point grabbed the church directory that had just been put out and started to look through names and say, okay, so who's on this list that we don't currently have on the list? So use social media in the same way. Those resources that you have to gain names and start conversations with people. So hopefully this gets you working on that. A couple areas that I want to be sure to cover as we think about who is I want to make sure that we don't limit ourselves and we don't limit the Holy Spirit. I said that earlier, but I want to offer a couple stories. I'm going to share a story and ask Emily to share a story about how God works through these. First thing I want to say, and hopefully this is obvious to all of us, but please spend some time praying over the list of who you're supposed to reach out to. Ask God for wisdom in that process. Ask him how to prioritize those names. And ask him to lead you to the right ones to meet with. So Becky and I actually were taking a trip back to Seattle. It was probably over a year ago. It was our first fundraising trip to go meet with people. We had sent out a group of letters of, 20 to 25 letters, I think. And in that, we obviously know a lot more than 25 people. We just didn't have much time there. And so we talked about who we should prioritize. And Becky said, I really feel like we should go meet with Sam Capps and this group of people that I used to work with at Thrivent Financial. They're a financial planning group. And Becky had worked there 5 years as their front desk person. And my gut reaction was like, wow, out of the top 25, I would never have chosen that group to meet with. Like, they aren't family, they aren't very close friends, but Becky felt called to meet with them. We went and met with them. We brought them tacos. They had a tradition of Taco Tuesday in their office when she worked there. So we stopped by the taco truck and we picked up tacos and I brought them to their office and just shared with them for 45 minutes about what our vision and ministry was. We followed up a few days later with Sam Capps, one of the partners of the firm. And he said, hey, you guys, on that sheet you gave me, there was one guy at the top who was going to give $250 a month. Can I be that guy? I'd like to be that guy. Like, I want to be the biggest one. And we're like, wow, look at God work. Like, in a place that I would have not ranked anywhere in the top 20 to 25, God moved and showed up in that way to provide for us. And he's a key ministry partner for us, not only financially, but through that team that we still check in with them when we go back to Seattle. So just a note, please pray over that list. The other thing I want to say is that, and those of you who have already started your fundraising, you're probably going to nod at this. The ones that you expect to give a lot might disappoint you and not give. The ones that you don't expect to give are probably going to surprise you and give. This is the upside down world of the kingdom. It's also the upside down world of giving. People who make the lowest income in the United States give the highest portion of their income to charitable causes. People who rank in the top 1% of wealth give the lowest percentage of their income. So be aware of that. Again, pray over these lists and ask God to show you the right one. And I'll ask Emily to share her Sam's Club story.
So for about a year, I was trying to fundraise to build a space for our missionary kids here at Global Outreach. So we started doing family missionary training and we had no space. So I would hurriedly transform offices into classrooms. It got a little crazy and we were having a lot of kids and it was wonderful. But as you can imagine, kids are running up and down our hallways. Marla's trying to do her financial process and it's like pandemonium. And so I could tell stress levels would be elevated. And I'm like, you know what? We need a safe place. And so I felt like God was leading me, let's build this space out. And so I started, Greg and I worked together on casting the vision, creating this awesome document with Blake. And so I started speaking at churches, sharing with pastors, and God started chipping away at that. My goal was $55,000. And I was like, okay, I can do this. God can do this. And I got a promise from another fund. So it started me off with a $10,000 gift. And I was like, okay, that's awesome. And then it started getting a little shorter and little chipping away. And I was $25,000 in and I was like, oh, that's good. But then it stalled. And I was still speaking. I was still praying. And I'm like, man, why would you give me $25,000 for this classroom, God, if you're not going to meet the whole thing? Or 20,000. I don't know how much it was. It was close to that. And I felt discouraged, but we were praying about it. And then all of a sudden I got this random person who gave $10,000. I didn't ask. I didn't even talk to this person. He had just heard about it and felt like God was moving. I'm like, oh my gosh, $10,000. So I felt yet again, really encouraged. So I kept at it. We went to Sam's Club. And I had shared earlier that day at church, they're like, oh, do you have any praises? And I was like, someone gave $10,000 for this missionary kid classroom that I'm trying to raise money for and build out. And So I was in Sam's Club and someone goes, "Hey, John, Emily." And we're like, "Oh, hey." And we kind of knew this guy from church, but not really. And he goes, "Are you still trying to raise money for that classroom?" And we said, "Yeah." He's like, "You need to talk to my wife. You need to talk to my wife." And we're like, "Okay." And he's like, "She's part of this foundation and they have to give away a certain amount of money per year. You need to talk to my wife." So we're like, "Okay, we'll set up a meeting." He's like, "She's the boss now. You don't talk to me, you talk to her." He was very clear. And so we ran into them again in Sam's Club. And so I kind of shared the vision, invited her out to Global, showed her our warehouse that we wanted to transform into this space. And she looks at me and she goes, "Okay, how much do you need?" And I was like, "Oh gosh, like the whole amount or just like what would be nice?" And I looked at her and said, "I would like $25,000. And she goes, "Okay, I think we can do that." And I was like, "What?" She called me 3 days later and said, "Emily, we want to give the $25,000 plus a couple extra thousand to cover unexpected costs that you might have." And you guys, in one trip, God just blew me out of the water and put my pride in check. Like it wasn't Emily that was making this happen. It was him. He was in control. He wanted to care for missionary kids. And so thus, I'm going to show you, we're sitting in this beautiful classroom space and it's got breakout rooms and a living room, and God made it happen, not me.
So God's going to show up in ways, and again, those of you who are fundraising, you probably have already seen this. God's going to show up in surprising ways. Don't put a limit on him, and also make sure you share your vision widely. You never know when somebody's going to approach you when you're out shopping to let you know they want to give $25,000. So it's awesome to see God work in those ways. On the other side of the coin, do not be disappointed when you talk to the guy who you know is a millionaire and he's like, "Yeah, I'll pray for you." Just recognize that comes with this process. So hopefully that gives you a sense of who to ask and how to go about that process. We can certainly continue these conversations as well. So if anybody wants to chat offline, certainly send me a note after this and we can definitely do that. Let's shift our attention for the last 15 minutes of our time in this first session to how to reach out to these prospective donors. I am going to put my slide back in presentation mode. And hopefully you're all seeing the right one here. We're going to skip forward to that awesome list you just made. So one of the questions that Becky and John and I dealt with in presenting for this MOT is we have a standard way to do things that we do in the United States and that we do when we meet in person. So what we're going to do for the rest of this session and the next session is present what I would consider best practice, what we've seen work the best for us and our missionaries, recognizing that each of you is going to have to apply your own lens to how this could actually work for your context. So what is showing on screen right now are actually a couple documents that are out on the Dropbox. The one on the left-hand side is a personal letter from Becky and I, so you don't have to try to squint to read this if you don't want to. It's out on the Dropbox. You can grab it down. It's in a Word document. You can change it, update it, make it perfect for you, and use it. So you have my permission to steal the format if you'd like to. On the right-hand side is a letter from Global Outreach. You'll see John Darnell's signature on it from the CEO of Global Outreach International, and it's introducing you at the top. So you'll notice in the first line of the bolded first sentence of the that is bolded in the letter, "We are thankful for Greg and Becky Buell joining Global Outreach." This again is in a Word document format. You are going to pull it down. It has a bracket that says missionary name. You're going to type in your name in there, and you're going to send this as a PDF or a print letter out to your donors. So let's talk a little bit through this. If you're in the United States, typically we say if you're going to meet in person, mail these out in small batches because you're going to mail them to people you know in Washington State first, because if you're going to visit there personally, you need to make sure that they're all centrally located so you can actually visit them in the same week or two. We do not have that dilemma this time. So part of me says just throw the doors wide open and mail your letters out. What I will warn you about is do not mail all 200 of your letters at the same day, or you're going to be overwhelmed, because there is a process behind how we want you to do this. So think about your letters in small batches. You don't need to think geographically anymore because you are likely or not visiting these people in person, but you do want to consider a priority of some form. Maybe it's simply by last name. Maybe it's these groups that we talked about previously. Clump them into groups of whatever way is best so that you can introduce your ministry to them in an organized fashion. What you see here is this letter. Again, best practice, what we would do. You can see I have poorly attempted to write a handwritten envelope. This is why my wife does the envelopes typically, because you can hardly read the one that I wrote up in the top left. The idea of using a handwritten letter is that your friends are going to open it. It has our name on it, has their name handwritten. You don't want to print these out on the printer if you can avoid it, because you want them to feel personal. You want people to make sure they open them. Inside of that, there's a letter from Becky and I. What you'll see when you pull that out on the Dropbox is that it is a letter introducing our ministry. We want no surprises about this being a fundraising letter. This letter is an invitation for you to meet with them. It's asking if they would be willing to meet with you. Again, for most of us in this case, it's going to be by Zoom. But it's an invitation to meet with you about fundraising. We don't want any surprises in this process. You don't want people thinking, oh, they just want to get together with me. You want to make that very clear, and you'll see that in the template that we provided. There's also one from, I believe the Darnells might be in there as well. At least their handout that they're going to use is in the MOT box as well. And then the right-hand side is just that information sheet from Global Outreach. This offers you the benefit of an organization standing behind you. This is our endorsement of you. Once you become an appointee out of this training, you are part of our family, and we want to endorse you and stand behind you and let everybody know that you are with an organization. It notes that that we are a 501c3 in the United States, which means they can get a charitable tax donation by giving to you. And it has all the information about how to find you and to learn about us. So it's really an endorsement of you all. So the idea here, again, best practice is we would actually mail these out in batches, maybe of 10 or 15 at a time. In the letter, it says, we would love, I'm reading from the second to last paragraph, we would love to hear about how you're doing and to share more about this next step in person. We will be in Seattle from March 27th through April 8th, and we would love to find a time to connect with you. We will plan to reach out by phone in the next 2 weeks to follow up with you and schedule a time to meet if you're interested. So the reason we're recommending batches is you've got this limited time frame of the next week or two that you're going to call them and follow up. You don't want to overwhelm yourself with your full list that you've promised this to. So inform them when to expect your call on that letter, and send these out to the people who you think you might be interested in. Again, for those of you in Bulgaria, a couple options that we can think of for this. One is, do you have a Barnabas team or people who are in the United States who support you, who would be willing to help take this on? So you've created the letter, you've sent them a PDF that they could simply print out. Would they be willing to hand address your envelopes for you to send them out to people here in the United States? Or you could also email them. One of the challenges with email is you don't know if it went to their spam box, etc., but that would be another option. So we just want to present that as a way where you can get the information about your ministry in front of them, as well as an endorsement from Global Outreach before you have your conversation. So this is meant ahead of your conversation. It's just meant to drum up some interest. Any questions of these two letters that you're seeing? Yeah, Draghi?
Just to clear, to know, did I understand correct? One of the letter is introduced to us from Global Outreach, and you will send to all our ministry partners after we give you the list, on spreadsheet, actually on Excel, and you will send that we are part of Global Outreach. You're welcome. You're welcoming us.
So actually that letter is in Dropbox, and you'll just pull it down and actually put your name in it, and then you will send it out to your donors along with your personal letter. Yeah, Blake?
So these are to potential donors, not people that have already given, correct?
Absolutely, yep. These are the two potential donors who you're trying to get a time to meet on Zoom or meet with in person.
And then if we are trying to do this, you said 15 to 20 people at a time. How do you do that from Uganda?
That is a great question. That is one of the questions that we have of what are the options to make phone calls? And Emily, you had some ideas.
I just thought of something that John and I did, because Blake, when we were in Ecuador, we had to communicate with our donors about coming back. And one thing that we did together is John and I made a video, like short, 3 minutes, about what God was doing. And we said, we'll be following up with you soon. That's kind of a personal touch. I mean, that's just an idea. You could try it. Bob and Michelle Peterson have done that to communicate with their donors because they can't get to them all in person. And so instead, I mean, you could have somebody from the States sending this letter out, but you could send them like a personal video that says, hey, this is what our ministry, this is what God's doing. People connect with that emotion that you have. And then you could say, I'm going to be following up with you in the next couple of days, weeks, whatever that is.
Yeah, and that, Blake, that's a good point about the technological solutions are going to vary for each of you in how to do this. It might need to be a Zoom call, as awkward as that sounds. Like, hey, can we have a quick Zoom meeting to introduce my ministry so we can set up a later Zoom call? A little more clumsy than it would typically be. But, I don't know, Signal, WhatsApp, those kinds of apps offer you the ability to dial, Skype. Those kinds of things could be helpful as well. Fernando, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, since I'm in a transition, so do you think that this letter introducing me as a new missionary with Global Outreach would be good if I can send them to all my contacts, the ones already giving to me, but plus the others together with my newsletters?
Yep.
I think it's my thinking that would be good to have that letter sent with my next newsletter. Would that be possible? You think it's a good idea?
Yeah, utilize that in whatever fashion you want, Fernando. What I would say is you might have a couple versions of it. One version might be, I want to introduce you. I'm proud to tell you that I'm a brand new missionary with Global Outreach International, although you've already been supporting my work. I switched organizations, and here's information on how you can give to me directly. Or it might be an introduction letter, which is more of how Becky's and I's was, for people who may not be supporting you already. But yeah, use that to your advantage in whatever way is helpful. I'm going to move us on to our last slide, which is the last few minutes we're going to spend time on is once we've sent that letter, we've promised to contact them in some way. Again, I'm going to use the word call. It might look different for each of you. But what do you need to do to have a good call? Again, the intention of this call is to set up a one-on-one time. This is not the actual meeting. You're not just sending them a letter and then calling them out of the blue. You're now just calling to schedule a time with them. Couple of thoughts on this. This is from the Scott Morton book that you may have seen, a format of what this conversation could look like. In any call, you need to make sure that there's a relational basis for it. So you don't want to say, hey, Becky, going to chat with you. Let me jump into my letter. Did you get that in the mail? I can tend to be that way because I think that way. But make sure you leave some space for small talk, relational entry to catch up. One of the things we always recommend is confirm that it's a good time. So when you're calling them in that next week or so after you sent your letter, say, hey, is this a good time for us to chat about the letter that I sent? If they say no, volunteer, just ask them when is a good time to call them back. So it's always it's a minor touch point, but always good to ask them that. The third thing that we would recommend is making sure that you're referring to the letter. Hey, did you get that letter that I sent in the mail? Or have you gotten that email that I sent last week? If they have not received it, I would say, hey, let me resend that to you. Let me email that to you instead. Make sure they have the letter in front of you. Again, we don't want to go down the wrong path and have them assume that this is just like a friendly catch-up. We want them to understand this is about your ministry and to have a sense of what that is about before you enter into this conversation. So refer to your letter. Make sure they've had a moment to review that before you jump into this call. Fourth, this is a key one. Tell them why you thought of them. This is not, I thought of you because you're one of 400 people on my mailing list. I thought of you because of the awesome time that we spent in high school together. I thought of you because you're one of the key people in my small group or Bible study. I thought of you because as I visited you at the doctor's office, you've always seemed to share a passion for missions. So make sure they know during this call why you thought of them. You have a relational connection with each of them. Even if it's a friend of a friend or a friend of your parents. Hey, I know you're a friend of my parents, and I know that you share a similar heart that they do. And so I'm calling to follow up with you. So make sure you have that relational connection in there. And then finally, request the meeting. Request a separate time where you can actually get on the Zoom or phone or in person to meet with them, to tell them more about your vision. We're going to cover that in the session after our break this morning, what that actual in-person or Zoom meeting looks like. But this is simply to request that time and ask if they are interested. I don't think Becky and I got any declines in this. I'd be surprised if you get any declines on this. So most people are going to say yes, they are interested in meeting with you here. One minor detail that is not on the slide, but I want to make sure you know, if you are requesting a meeting with a couple, please be sure to ask that both the husband and wife be in attendance at that meeting. You don't want the telephone game where one person has to relay everything that you shared back to the spouse and talk to them. So please request that both of them attend. That will help them hear the same vision and same heart that you have, and will also allow them to make a decision moving forward easier. Once you've set up that time and you've requested that meeting, you've agreed on a time, go ahead and follow up that conversation that you just had and confirm that in writing to them. Hey, Fernando, I'm looking forward to seeing you next Saturday at the coffee shop at 2 o'clock. Can't wait for our time together. Let me know if you have any questions ahead of that. Put that in writing as a marker for them. That can often serve for us in the United States and probably throughout the world as a reminder to put something on your calendar like, oh yeah, I promised Fernando that I was going to meet with him. Let me get that on my calendar. So put that in writing via email or text. And then finally, before you get to the meeting, touch base 24 hours ahead of your appointment and make sure that they are still on for that time. So Fernando, it's now Friday. Fernando, looking forward to seeing you tomorrow at Starbucks at 2. Can't wait for our time together. That allows him a reminder to say, oh no, I totally forgot about that. Okay, let me figure out how I'm going to make that happen still. Please be sure to do that. That will save you and them a lot of confusion and time sitting in a coffee shop or sitting on Zoom when nobody's showing up. These are just some simple steps to put in your process to make sure that these appointment times get met. You'll also find in Scott Morton's Funding Your Ministry, Chapter 10 actually does have some script ideas for this phone call of different ways to get to these points that we're talking about. So refer to Chapter 10 to see ideas of that in action. Any questions on the phone call or contact, I'll call it in this case, this part that we're talking about here, of how to get this appointment? What ideas do you all, Blake, and those of you not in the United States, what ideas do you have of how this might work? So we talked about a letter in the mail and a phone call, but any ideas how that presents differently for y'all?
I'll probably first reach out on like social media to contacts that I have already made contact with. And then the only problem I foresee is phone calls because I don't think I'll be able to do that long distance. Unless I mention something about social media doing like a phone call through like Facebook Messenger or something like that. If you have any other ideas, I'm all open to them.
Yeah, I know Emily mentioned last week when we were discussing this that Facebook Messenger has a call functionality that I thought I didn't know about that, so that could be a helpful one. One of the ideas that Blake that I might recommend for instead of social media to introduce yourself is an email. Could you send a direct email to each person that has the attached letters attached? Because one of the advantages of that is if you do that, when you touch base with them in follow up, whether it's a phone call or a Zoom touch point, you could ask them if they have received do they have that documentation? Again, you don't want to enter in this cold, and so email can oftentimes be a good attachment place where you can say, hey, can you check out these letters that I've attached?
I guess for me, my first contact is social media of, hey, here's a little blurb about what I'm doing. Do you mind if I add you to my mailing list to contact you via email? And then I end up sending the email and then making follow-up after that because most people are on social media now.
Yep. I think that especially makes sense if you're on the field already and serving and people are aware of that. So.
I found the video and I haven't watched it, so I'm just letting you guys know. John and I have learned a lot since we probably did this video. Give grace, but it will at least give you an idea of what we did and that then John, he really spearheaded this, emailed individuals, personal emails. Hey, how's it going? We'd love to set up a call after you watch this, ask what questions, because we have heard communicate early, communicate often, what you're doing, share the vision, and keep doing that, because if you do that, you stay top of mind. And so I think they really do want to hear your voice, not just through digital writing back and forth. So if you can make it happen where they can hear your voice, it's powerful.
Yep.
have a question. Since I'm in the States, I know it's possible for me to send out letters, but in terms of like timing, would it be okay to send out emails so I can like start those meetings sooner rather than like waiting until I get like I know like, oh, they've probably received the letter now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think if you're talking about close family members who you can guarantee care about this, then I think it's probably okay to send an email to get that conversation started. I wouldn't do it with people you don't know very well or with people who don't know about your ministry yet. So I'd only do that with people who are very well aware of what you're up to and know your passion and can get on board with that. The advantage of a letter is it gives somebody a few minutes to read it and prepare their mind of like, oh, okay, this is what this is going to be about. And so the letter is helpful because it guarantees that you have readership in a handwritten format. And it also allows you to be able to follow up with them. One of the challenges of email is you email somebody and they don't respond. And then you email again and then they don't respond. And you think, are they ignoring me? Do I have the right email address? What is going on here? The letter, at least in the United States, serves as a functional piece that you're pretty reliably going to know that they got the letter.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
you can follow up on that versus the awkward email follow-up.
I've been reaching out to people like over text and social media, kind of like Blake was saying, to get their contact information. So I'm like sharing what I'm doing with those people already as I like compile my list. So I was thinking like, okay, so they kind of already know what I'm doing, and then send out like an email with the letters and then follow up with a phone call for people I want to meet with. And
Yeah.
that way they don't need to respond over the email.
So you could also future date your letters. So like start with the people that you have contact information on email right now, like he was saying with your close family, and then go ahead and mail your letters in the next like week or two, but like predate them for a week ahead. That way you already know like, okay, they'll get these letters in 2 weeks or whatever, and then schedule those meetings for then. Just an idea.
Yeah, sort of lay out a plan for what next batch is going to look like.
I'm going to pause our questions for now and let Greg wrap up so that we do all get a snack bathroom break. So Greg, is there anything else you have to say?
That's it. We will pick up in the next one about what the actual meeting looks like.
Please, if you do have more questions though, put it in the chat bar so we're keeping a record of it, because we do want to be, I mean, this is what Greg and John are here for, and the rest of us to help problem solve and work back and forth. So I would say let's give each other 5 minutes. So at whatever time, 11, be back here on our Zoom call. Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, y'all. Yeah, I watched that fundraising in the pandemic video afterwards, and I was like, oh, painful.
Welcome back, guys. Sorry, I'm chewing some snack right now. Okay, that's better. Enjoy that wonderful cinematography that I dropped in Facebook later on today. You know, get some popcorn and sit back, enjoy the ride. Greg, it's all up to you, guy. You're up to this.
Don't we all hate watching videos of ourselves? We'll have this to look forward to. All of these sessions are being recorded. We can go back and watch ourselves later and be entertained. We want to now spend our time talking through the actual meeting. So we just talked about who to reach out to. We talked a little bit about how to reach out for the best practice. Now we want to talk about what do we do once we actually get that meeting. So we've scheduled the meeting, we've confirmed with them 24 hours ahead of time, and now it is time to actually go execute that meeting. I'm not sure if that makes any of you nervous. Just saying that myself, and I know what's coming up in this presentation. For Draghi saying no doesn't make him nervous. He's a rock star when it comes to fundraising, I think. It makes me nervous just saying it. So that's what we're going to talk about. Hopefully you're all seeing my slide again. And somehow I figured out, by the way, I'm going to have to figure this out. You all disappeared when I did that, but I'll figure that out once we go. First thing is, hopefully you're all seeing my clear process and effective methods.
We can't see your slide, Greg.
Oh, you can't? Oh, yeah. That would make sense because I haven't shared you guys. That's why. You have this minor detail on Zoom. You actually have to share your screen. Thank you, Becky. There we go. Now I can see you all as well. This is perfect. Doesn't this conversation look really pleasant? Do you remember those days when we all used to get together and like have coffee and like sit on a couch beside each other? And
I remember that.
John's old enough to remember when we were able to do that.
That's right.
So as pleasant as that looks, the reality is that your conversation is probably going to look a little bit more like this. I don't actually know who these people are, but I thought they looked like really nice people when I Googled for a Zoom meeting. And I thought that this is probably more what our reality is going to look like as we meet with people. So let's talk a little bit about what this is going to look like to have a face-to-face meeting. I'm probably going to call that in-person or face-to-face, recognizing that the pandemic presents and geography presents a challenge in this case. So just note that. We know these will be virtual meetings. We also want to make sure, again, because of how the letter introduced it and how you set up these meetings, that everybody walks in knowing that these are fundraising meetings. So be sure you do the work up front to make sure that that happens. The other side of this coin is that you also want to treat it as a fundraising meeting. Becky's and my first meeting was actually with our pastor, who we had just left the church at in Seattle when we moved to Tupelo. Him and his wife were flying out to Israel the next morning. So we sent the letter and we said, we're going to be here from these dates to these dates. And he said, oh, guys, I could only meet with you that first night. Could you meet at 8 o'clock at the coffee shop that night, because we fly out to Israel early the next morning? And we thought, like, oh, that's awesome. He's going to dedicate time and meet with us. Him and his wife show up. We sit and we chit chat. How are you doing? You know, they're asking us how Mississippi is, and we're talking to them about the church and their family. We go on for 45 minutes, you guys, just like catching up, because we're their friends too. Like it's not just ministry connection. Gets to 45 minutes in, at 8:45, they get a text from their daughter, who's 16 years old, who's babysitting, who's like, okay, I'm done babysitting. Can you pick me up? And they're like, okay, guys, we need to leave here in the next 10, 15 minutes. We keep chit-chatting. And at the end, we awkwardly slide the hand out and be like, oh, so here's what we were talking about. Take a look at it, and we'll get back to you. I see John and Emily laughing because it's painful to think about how awkward that is. What Becky and I learned coming out from that meeting is they knew that that was a fundraising meeting, you guys. They knew that the entire intent was to hear about our ministry and hear about fundraising, and we never got around to it. So it was just as awkward for them as it was for us that we didn't actually get to the point of our meeting. So be sure that you've not only set up the meeting well, but also recognize that it is your job in the conversation to get to the point of the meeting, which is to share about your vision and your ministry and to ask them to be part of the team that invests in you through prayer and financial support. So take advantage of the fact that you all know what you're there for, and also use that relational connection. We thought of you because you're our pastor, and we've enjoyed your leadership the last few years, and we know that you have a heart for missions and missionaries. Use that relational connection to turn the corner and get into your ministry work. And we found for Becky and I that we took the first opportunity. So when people said, well, how is Mississippi? We tended then to, from about the second conversation forward, to take that as our cue to move into ministry. Because we knew that if we covered the ministry part and we had that conversation for 15, 20 minutes, if there was 20 minutes at the end of the time that we could catch up on personal stuff, we could. But don't delay. Take that first little on-ramp that you can find and direct it towards your ministry. So they would say, how's Mississippi? And we'd say, Mississippi is great. Can we tell you about the ministry that we've been able to be a part of since we moved there? Yeah, we'd love that. So take that momentum that you have coming into the meeting and use it to actually get you into the conversation about what you're there for. Here is a potential outline for a Zoom presentation. This used to say in-person presentation, so I really adapted it. I really revised this slide significantly by putting Zoom at the top. This is just an outline. You don't have to do this. Your conversation does not need to be a half an hour. It could be shorter. It can be longer if they ask a lot of questions, but it's probably going to be shorter than this. Entry points for 5 minutes. Again, don't enter, just like we said on the phone call, don't enter this conversation awkwardly and like thrust your hand out or, put your presentation on screen like, okay, so let's get down to it. Make sure you touch base of how they're doing, how are things going, maybe even ask about, what's on their heart, how can you be praying for them. Make sure you engage with them at the beginning to just catch up, learn how they're doing. Then second, this is where I would use this entry point, this transition. Take a question or a moment where they're offering it to you to turn the corner. So a story can often be a good place to do this. So how are you guys doing? Oh man, we're doing so well. You know what really encouraged me, if you don't mind, if I could tell a story about something that happened last week or that happened last year or an update on my ministry. Ask them if you can share a story with them and then begin this transition. We're going to talk a little bit about story. You had a pre-MOT video on story as well. But start thinking about stories that you can use to share an introduction to your ministry to get the passion and the emotion involved. So we'll talk through that a little bit more. Vision casting is what we started out the earlier session on. What is your vision? Tell me about your vision. What questions does that lead us to? Fernando, you recognize that. People are going to ask questions. So you want to save some space here, not only for you to talk, but for the prospective donor or ministry partner that you're interacting with to ask questions and for them to speak. What it would be best is if you can actually get them to express their passion in this conversation. So we're going to talk through that in the vision casting portion of this meeting. The yellow one is the one that makes me the most nervous, is the ask. Okay, so we've shared vision. Now I actually have to ask you, will you prayerfully consider joining my investment team? This makes me nervous. Draghi doesn't get nervous about this. He's like, I can't wait to get to the ask. This is the important part. Because he's also asking them to pray too, which we learned earlier in the week. So this is the part where you're stepping up and you're asking them to support your ministry specifically. And then finally, closing. You want to set follow-up. We're going to talk about what follow-up looks like on how to end this conversation well, and making sure that you know what the next steps are in this process. I'm going to actually ask John to step in to walk us through the ask, because there is an important story that he always tells about when you get to the ask, that he's not actually going to be at the end of our phone call. He has a donor lunch that he has to head to at the end of our time, but I want him to share his story so we understand that when we get to the ask, and I'll refer back to it then.
Yeah, Greg, and I was actually thinking about when you said, hey, you need to text the person you're meeting with the next day and remind them that you're meeting. I did that last night. I got the little thumbs up from him, so hopefully he's there when I get there. But the ask it's so vital to do that well, and it's really uncomfortable. The video I shared with you guys earlier this week, Emily asked me afterwards, she said, so was Corey reading a script? I said, no, I only had about 8 minutes of presentation prepared, and anything he said, he came up with on his own, including the bit of an awkward, like, oh my goodness, John just asked me for $2,000. It was all natural. It was all natural. Anyway, so we had this discomfort, maybe Draghi doesn't, but I have this discomfort coming into saying, will you prayerfully consider being a part of our investment team? So when I say that, I'm quiet and I count to 15 in my head. So you ready? We're going to do this together. Krimi, will you prayerfully consider being a part of our investment team?
Am I supposed to answer?
No, you did great. You let us sit there for 15 seconds exactly.
Was it 15? Whoa, good.
Yeah. And since we're based in Mississippi, we're really good at counting. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. So you're good. You can do that all the way to 15. And so the awkwardness culturally, I don't know for you guys, but for us is getting there and saying, will you prayerfully consider, waiting 1 second, and then making excuses. Like, will you prayerfully consider being our investment team? Well, I know, it's been a tough year, and it's really, I know you guys probably get asked for money all the time, and, you're missionaries too, so you probably don't have anything to get. Anyway, just pray for us. See y'all later. You can start telling the person not to give because you feel awkward. So when I was little, to tell the story Greg actually wants me to tell. When I was little, I used to always go to my grandmother's house, and she made the best biscuits. Can I get an amen? Anybody? Europeans, do we know the biscuits? Okay. All right. So Google biscuit later if you don't know what biscuit is. But great bread. It's awesome bread. And I would always get really excited. You know, you pull up at grandma's house and you walk in and you can smell the biscuits. And you say, I called her Mama. Mama, I'm excited about the biscuits, you know. And she would say, oh, well, I went to the store and they didn't have the flour I wanted. And so she was making an excuse for her biscuits, you know. Then she pulls them out of the oven. Oh, Mama, I'm so excited about these biscuits. And she'd say, oh, well, somebody called when I was supposed to take them out of the oven, and I think they're burned. They're a little burned. And then it's like, okay. Well, she finally puts them on the table, you know. I'm so excited about it. Well, they just didn't turn out like I was hoping they would. It's like, you know, and you bite it and it's fantastic. It's just as good as you imagined the biscuit would be. But, we're going to say no biscuiting. So that would be my encouragement to you guys. No biscuiting. Don't be like Mama. Whenever you share the vision, whenever you make the ask, whenever you feel uncomfortable, your tendency will be to biscuit. I want you to remember my Mama. And do not biscuit. Resist the temptation to make excuses, to give the donor an out, to tell them not to give. And silently sit there and smile and let them answer the question that you asked them.
Thank you, John. So we'll cover that in more detail, but I wanted John to be able to share that story when he was on with us, because we will talk about no biscuiting. Let there be space in that conversation. I want to move us forward to what I'm offering as an example handout. Again, this handout example is both on the Dropbox for both the Buells and the Darnells. We put up handouts that we've used previously. I don't think either John or I or Becky or Emily or I would offer that ours are perfect. I can look at mine and think, oh my gosh, there's several things I would change about this if I did it again. But we don't offer them. What I want to show you about this potential handout, and again, this works really well if you're in person because you literally hand this across the table, but it could be something you email to people 24 hours before your appointment and ask them to have in front of them for their Zoom call with you as well, is it covers those three main points. So remember, our conversation started with catch-up or entry points. Then we went to transition and the story, vision casting, and the ask. So I want to walk us through this very briefly. The transitions or stories were the photos. So for each of these photos on this page, these 4 photos, Becky and I had a story that we could tell about how we were eager to work with missionaries to support Helen Singh in India at the orphanage and child's home that she runs in school. Dave and Julie Eyre, which is actually Becky's brother-in-law and sister in Uganda, working on the islands of Lake Victoria. 8 Days of Hope, which is a relief and development group that works in crisis here in the United States. Or Shim in Uganda, baptizing folks and teaching them to become pastor trainers. So for each of these, as we were sitting in person, we could actually hand this across the table and point to one of these pictures and say, can I tell you about 8 Days of Hope and a way that we've been able to be involved in their ministry and support them? So each of these stories becomes a face of the work that you're doing. In addition to that, it does have our name. This is what I would say is our vision: to serve, support, and encourage missionaries to help them thrive in their work around the world. If I was going to redo this sheet, I might not put the details behind it, but we thought we'd offer a little bit more detail about what we're actually going to do to support missionaries. And then, of course, we have the Global Outreach logo, partly because that's important to who we're actually working for us. So this covers those first 2. Transition and story gives me something to point at and gives them an emotional connection to this. You saw those pictures in John's video that he played talking to Corey. Again, you can do this in PowerPoint. You can do this on a handout ahead of time, whatever format works best for your scenario. I get a little scared by PowerPoint. Watching John do what he did on the conversation with Corey, I was like, that looks way hard, and I'm not sure I'd navigate it as well as John did. So it is up to each of you to decide what's the best way you're going to present in this pandemic world, whether it be through PowerPoint, whether it be a handout that you want to send them in a PDF ahead of time, whatever is most convenient, you decide. But then the last thing that this does is we've now had the conversation about a story. It then moves us to our vision. We're able to share briefly about our vision. When we get done with the questions and engagement around that, we can simply flip over the sheet. And on the back of the sheet, it actually moves us towards the ask. Would you prayerfully consider being part of our investment team? We're seeking monthly partners at these levels. We need one donor at $250, 4 at $100, work our way down. And then it's got our giving information about where to go to give online. It's got how you can mail a check in, got all those details. This became a real nice tool that we could flip over once we got to the ask part and say, what we're looking for is people to support us on a monthly basis to help in this vision. For Becky and I, the number of people here was pretty minimal because we didn't have a massive goal in front of us. For some of you, you're going to need higher levels and way more people for your ministry. You'll notice ours started at 25. Again, this is something I would probably change in the future if I was going to use it. I would start a little higher. John talked about that on Tuesday. Let people, downgrade from there if they want to. But especially if you're raising, $100,000 to work in 3 different countries like one of our missionaries does, you're not going to get there fast at $25 a piece. So use this as appropriate for your ministry. This is what we would call a giving tree. We found it helpful, and again, best practice for us in how to deliver that ask. So I do want to lay out what this handout looks like. It can be a very helpful tool in the presenting. You could also use a PowerPoint like John did. You'll notice that John's PowerPoint covered all of these exact same areas that we've presented in this handout. So we talk about that transition after we've caught up and how are you all doing and how are things going. We transition. Again, one of the key ways we found to do that is to share a story. Hopefully you've all watched the pre-MOT video on sharing a story. So I'm not going to spend much time on this, but you want to keep your story simple. Use one name. Let it be about an individual or a couple. If you're talking about students in Bulgaria, maybe choose one student. If you're talking about students in Uganda, maybe it's one student. Fernando, maybe it's one pastor. One person you've reached. So keep it simple. Offer as many details as you need to move the story forward, but not too many. So it was a beautiful day. The grass was green. The birds were soaring in the air. There's blue sky that day. And the clouds were so fluffy. You get the point. Like, don't belabor the point. Get to where you're going with your story. Offer as few details as necessary to hit the target, what you're aiming for. Make your story have one lesson in it. Don't make your story have to have 3 or 4 points. You could be a Baptist preacher. I grew up in a Baptist household, and so my dad was a pastor. You had to have 3 or 4 points to your sermon. Don't aim for that in your story. Make your sermon your presentation have one thing you're getting at. What's the lesson you want them to walk away from with this? So I'm going to use the Bulgarian students. If you're sharing the story, the one lesson is how students in Bulgaria need Christ. So one of the things that John and I talked about following his presentation with Corey that we debriefed, John said, man, what I really missed was talking about why there was a need in Bulgaria. Like, what was the precise reason? Like, we've heard that there's only 1% of the population that's Christian. Oh, wow, that's important. Okay, there's a clear need here. So what is that one lesson that you're trying to convey in telling your story? And then finally, it needs to lead you to this invitation. Let your story move you forward to get the donor to be thinking, how can I be part of that? Hopefully you're sharing your vision and your ministry with enough passion that your donors automatically leave that story thinking, wow, that's interesting. I want to find out more about this. That's going to lead you very well into your vision. So if you can set up your story to have these components and allow you to move you forward, have momentum to go into your vision. One of the things I love about this picture for vision casting is the key point of presenting your vision is you want to make sure that there's a space for the donor. This picture like hurts my heart. Every time I see it, I have like a little bit of anxiety because I want to know where that one puzzle piece is. Like, it's missing. Like, is it in the box? Did it get dropped on the floor? Like, did they miss it? It makes me nervous to see that. You sort of want to set up your vision in a way that the donor leaves that part of the discussion thinking, man, there's a piece here that I could fill in. Like, I think I have that puzzle piece with me. I think I could be part of this. So as we get into the vision, we want to make sure it covers two things. First of all, we want to make sure it is clear and succinct, like you all talked about earlier in sharing your vision. That was one of the highlights of all three visions that were shared. I think they were all very clear and all very succinct. So congratulations on that. I think you're in good shape with your vision statements. But then additionally, how does the donor fit into that goal? So you're asking for monthly support when you're having these meetings. I want to make that clear. Make sure we don't miss that point. You're asking for ongoing monthly support. You can go back later and ask for specific projects. Maybe you need to build another room onto the school. Maybe you have a special outreach to students. Go back and ask for project giving later, one-time giving. But for now, when you're meeting in person, we're wanting you to ask for ongoing support, monthly support to make your ministry possible. How do they fit in the goal? We talked about the need to be fully funded before you go on the field. Becky and I are actually talking about this earlier in the week. I want to clarify, fully funded is actually for your benefit. It is our policy. We want to make sure you're fully funded. But we know that missionaries who struggle with fundraising, that things become way more stressful, that their ministry gets limited. And we also know it can be a key factor in you having to come off the field or not being able to continue your ministry. So we ask this for your benefit. And so one of the things you can actually say to the donor is if they say, how can I play a part? Well, my goal is I still need to raise X amount of dollars, or I still have all of these people at these levels that I need to give for me to be able to do this. That becomes very motivating for people. Think about Emily sharing about how much was needed for the classroom. The donor says, oh, I can step up and do that. So always have that in your mind, what that goal is to be 100% fully funded, and ask them to play a part in meeting that need. The other piece of this is what changes when your vision succeeds. So you've told a story. Your story could be a positive story. It could also be a negative story about somebody who you weren't able to reach in time. But now when you get to your vision, how do you tell the donor, hey, when you invest in this ministry, here's what's going to change. So we're going to have students who are going to come to know Christ, and they're actually going to spread the gospel throughout their country when you give. Hey, we have missionary kids that we are working with that not only are they, but their parents will be more effective in reaching Uganda for Christ's gospel when I do this work. We are training pastors. So you get the idea. For each of these, it's fairly simple to know what changes when donors invest. And you want to convey that in this part of the conversation. If you're able to do this, here's what we will be able to accomplish. And again, your story has probably led you to that point as well. So you're really building off of that same movement that your story offered you. I'm going to pause for a second. Any questions on the story or the vision casting portion? How to move that forward? Yeah, Elena.
I have a question on the ask, if it's okay to
Go for it.
now. So do you have something like a policy or an example, a template, how to ask and how to present the global outreach policy?
Say that part again, the ask.
Okay, so far we've been trained by crew, and when it came the part with the ask, we had something like their financial policy, that it is legal. It explains to the donor a little bit about it, like 100% go through, and working with ECFI, etc. So do you have this thing like a template that you would give it to us, or we should figure it out by ourselves and try it?
Yeah, there's a good question. A couple of options. You definitely want to make sure that they know that you have the backing of a mission organization that's standing with you, as well as your local church. So a couple of options. One is you could use that same letter that we're providing in the Dropbox that you were going to send out ahead of time to request the meeting as our endorsement. You will also have there will be a page for you on our website at this point, so that they can verify that you're on our website. You could also then print out information from our website about our accountability and our ECFA relationship. So there's a variety of ways that you can do that. Depending on who your donors are, that ECFA and that accountability practice will be an important part of the work. So certainly be sure to use the references on our website or the letter that's already in your Dropbox to provide that support. Yeah, Blake?
I have a question. When it comes to being fully funded, am I able to use like the consequence of not being fully funded would be being pulled from the mission field, or would you not recommend using that?
I would just say that for you, I think there's a couple things that you could say, Blake, is that you have a deadline. We're going to talk about deadlines when we get to the ask portion of this, which we're still going to cover. But you have a deadline, and you also have a need because you need to focus your time on ministering to missionary kids, not to fundraising. So what I would say is that we want you all to recognize, and again, some of you are in different situations. Kat, you're not there yet, so your full-time job between now and then is fundraising. For the rest of you, you're balancing ministry that's already ongoing with fundraising. So Blake, in your case, I would say, hey, I need to raise this money so I can really dedicate my time and effort to focusing on the kids who are in need here. And right now I'm having to spend about 50% of my time doing fundraising. And as soon as I can wrap that up, I can get back to 100% being focused on these kids and their needs. So I don't know if I would say that you're coming off the field as a result of it, but I would definitely give them a deadline and a reason to support right now.
I don't think you ever want to use scare tactics, like especially because that's not who we are as Global, and our emphasis is really for your good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good point. Yeah,
Okay.
My team and I, we made like a vision and calling album when we do meeting with potential ministry partners. So I wanted to suggest if, for example, I don't know, to make like a, I don't know, that's because the format is like too big with gigabytes or megabytes, I don't know, but to do like Google, I don't know, to share all these materials which we can use, and for example, we can share our vision calling album, some brochures, some materials which we're using, or other ones who are using some different materials. So to help each other, like materials, that's
a really good point, Draghi. We do definitely want to open up an avenue for you all to share with each other. We recommend that and encourage that. It's one of the reasons we recommend looking through newsletters that other missionaries write, because it actually helps you come up with your own ideas. The other thing I note, Draghi, I appreciate you reminding me of this. If you have your own presentation method that's working well for you, especially those of you who are already doing this, stick to that. Like, we're not telling you have to go to the handout. We're not telling you have to do a PowerPoint. If you got this down and you're rocking it, keep going that direction. We're not telling you to change anything. We're just telling you what we've found most useful for us and what we've heard from missionaries is working. So to hear that that's working well for your team, I would say keep using that, not only tool, but also use the format of your meetings and how you set them up. So we're not telling you have to switch anything. It's just how we found it to work the best for us. Yeah, Kat.
So I've been having trouble thinking of like what kinds of stories I could share since I'm not actually there and haven't been there yet. So I don't know if you guys have any ideas or input on that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Kat. I guess I was thinking of the group. The rest of the group is sort of in the middle of ministry, so the rest of the group is actually benefited by the fact that they've got stories of people that they've reached or not reached. What I would say, Kat, is that you have resources not only in the rest of the GSF team, like Blake and the Gortneys, et cetera, but you're also going to have social media. So use the stories that they are experiencing. Blake, matter of fact, could be a really good teammate to you in this period by offering a specific story of the type of work that she's been able to do in the last year. And then, Kat, you're simply able to say, hey, one of the teammates I'm going to be working with shared with me this story. Can I share it with you? You tell the story, and then you move forward with your vision. So use that work that's already happening to your advantage.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, also another question. When thinking about like being fully funded and trying to figure out how to word my question. So we want to ask for monthly partners mostly, but I get confused when I think about like, okay, so I need this much pledged per month, but then also having like a launch fund sort of thing where you have a lot of one-time costs like flights, and I have the possibility of having to self-quarantine and pay for that. And so like, how do you approach that when coming to potential donors, where it's like you want monthly partners, but you also have this large sum for like one-time costs?
couple ways that I think that will happen. One way is I think that will be a default for some people who will say, hey, I can't give monthly, but I can give a $1,000 gift. That happened with my cousin, for Becky and I. Like, can't give monthly, but I can give $1,000. Does that work for you? So that's one way that it's going to happen. The other way is that once you meet your monthly goal, then you can start to say hey, now I just need $25,000 to get me the rest of the way there. I've seen missionaries approach it in 2 different phases effectively as well. What we're suggesting here is that the importance of getting that one-on-one meeting, whether it's through Zoom or in person, has such weight to it that we want you to ask for the monthly gift as the priority. And then if they can't do that, then accept a one-time gift.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So I'm going to move us forward to the hardest part. I thought this was a cute cartoon. This is from Scott Morton's book. You can see the miner. I give up. There's no use. He's done all this work. You've done all this work. You've sent out letters. You've contacted them to set up a meeting. You've now spent several minutes on a call on Zoom with them to ask them to hear your story and to explain your vision. Don't biscuit at this point. Don't back out. Don't hesitate. Don't do what Becky and I did and forget to ask for money. Learn from us doing things wrong. Commit to making the ask. Ask the people you're sitting with to join your prospective ministry team and fulfill that role for your vision. So if you've told your story well, if you've offered your vision well, you set it up so that the donor inherently understands that there's a role for them to play. All you're doing now is asking them to play that role. So will you prayerfully consider joining my investment team to reach students in Bulgaria, to teach students in Uganda, to train pastors in Spain? It's that simple. No biscuiting would follow along with the let them say yes. Don't jump in and say, well, I know that you're on a fixed income and you're probably not really in a position. I know the economy is tough right now. All the things that John talked about, you'll be inclined to do that. Becky and I had really worked out our presentation method about 3 appointments in, and we felt really good about it. And we're like, okay, we got this. And we got here, and I asked, will you prayerfully consider joining our investment team so we can support missionaries? And about a second later, Becky said, well, so what we're thinking was, it's so hard, you guys. It's like anti-human nature to sit and be silent and allow for the awkward silence. But I want to encourage you, do not fill the space. Just be silent and let them say yes, or let them say no, or let them say, let me get back to you. So again, remember, you're asking them to prayerfully consider. You're not asking for a gift on the spot unless you feel comfortable with that. Maybe Draghi feels comfortable with that. We have missionaries who feel comfortable with that. Will you commit to give right now? And it works for them. If that works for you and you feel comfortable with it, keep doing it. John and I have found that we're not courageous enough. We say, will you prayerfully consider? That gives them time to go back and think about it, pray about it with their spouses if they're not there, like you saw about with Corey in the video. But give them the space to answer that. Who finds this part hard? Again, most of you are already doing fundraising. Do you find this part hard, like in asking them and then just waiting? Do donors typically make you wait 15 seconds like John had to wait? Sometimes I see Draghi, sometimes Emily says no. Fernando, what about you? What's your experience with that? Do they make you wait a long time?
You see, when you talk to people from a Latin American culture, it's crazy hard to do that because they are not used for something so direct. Can you give? Can you pray? And then wait. So I had to learn to wait and to understand. But in general, I would say it's always uncomfortable, but the donor, the possible donor, normally step in. The majority of the time, they step in. Sometimes they step in wrongly, like, what should I say now? And then you need to give a little help again. Did you understand what I said? But it's always kind of hard, but it's part of it. What I compare is when you are in your house and somebody knock your door to sell something to you, or if a Jehovah's Witnesses come, they ask you and they expect you to respond. So they are not afraid because, they need to make their point. So I think we need to make ours. And even if it's uncomfortable a little bit, we need to, but normally they do well.
Yeah, normally what I found, I'd agree with that, Fernando, is that they don't typically make you wait as long as John offered us the example of. Typically, people are eager, especially if you've covered a few bases. Again, from the beginning of this conversation, even to your letter, they understand it's about fundraising and about ministry. You've shared with them the relational passion that you believe that they will have. Like, why are you inviting them to this? They understand that part. You've laid out a vision. They know that there's this part coming. So if you skip this part, it's going to be more awkward for them than it is how painful for you that you never asked for money. So if you've done the process well, you're going to allow for them to be able to be part of this step fairly easily. They won't be surprised by this. The final part comes to follow-up. So this is a really important part of this. I will say that Becky and I often struggled with this part because the ask made us so nervous that once you finally got past that, it was like you almost forgot what you were doing next. So I'm not sure if you've ever had like an important meeting or an important test or something, and you think about it all week, and then it finally arrives, and you finish it, and then you're like, oh my gosh, what else was I supposed to be doing? It sort of feels like this at times. And again, I see a couple of you nodding because I think you recognize that this is how this sometimes feels. You get the important part done, and then you're like, oh, I forgot to set any follow-up. So a couple of things about follow-up. Be gracious and in positively no matter the income. I doubt you're going to have this said to you. We've never had it said to us, but like, no, I don't care about your ministry. How would you respond to that? Well, I'm sad to hear that, but I'm so excited that you met with us, and I really appreciate your time to do that. That was so nice of you to dedicate time to this. Most of your people are not going to say anywhere near that. Most of them are going to say, yes, I would gladly take time to pray about this. Yes, you know what? I don't need to take time to pray. My wife and I already discussed that we're planning on giving you $50 a month. That's going to happen quite a bit, you guys. You're going to show up at this meeting. Families already decided what they're ready to do. So be gracious. Make follow-up clear. Ask if you can follow up once they've had time to pray. So they say, yes, we'd love to pray about that. When can I follow up with you? You saw this, and this is one of the reasons we did this video that John presented on Tuesday. You saw how that works. You might have somebody say, oh, you know what? I'll get back to you sometime next week. I'll definitely get back to you. Here's the problem, is if you say that would be great. We'll do that. What happens when it comes to next week and you haven't heard back? And now it's 2 weeks later and you haven't heard back. And now you're a month later and you haven't heard back. Agree upon a time for follow-up. So let's say you get a donor who says, you know what, don't worry about following up. We'll pray about it and get back to you. Oh, I really appreciate you guys praying about that, but would love to actually find a time where I could commit to following up with you to just check in with you and see if you have any questions. Make sure you keep pursuing that until you get an agreement to follow up with them. Agree upon a time for follow-up. In general, you don't want to say, well, I'll call you sometime next week. Agree on a specific time on a specific day. So you heard John in his example. So Saturday in the afternoon would work for me. You know, you might have a parent say, well, kids get up from their naps around 2:30, so maybe about 3 o'clock. Does that work? Agree upon a specific time. Here's one of the reasons you want to agree upon a specific time is that Becky and I did this. We went back to our fundraising trip. We had this great conversation with this couple at brunch. They were actually missionary kids themselves. And so we're like, oh, this is going to be an easy one. Like, they're going to be passionate about this. We had a really enjoyable lunch. They bought us brunch with this like beautiful view of the Puget Sound. And then we said, hey, we're going to call you next week. We called next week, and they were hauling groceries in from their car. So it was like the awkward moment in the first place. And then we said, hey, good to chat with you again. Thanks for your time last week. Hey, have you guys had a chance to pray about being part of our investment team? And they're like fumbling things on the counter. You can hear them like setting the bags of groceries on the counter. And they're like, no, we haven't. No, we haven't had a chance to do that yet. Okay. Well, can you do that? So you get the point of where I'm going with this. Make sure that the time and date is set. And then again, if you can follow up with a text or an email 24 hours ahead to confirm that, that will help them come to a decision point ready for that call. Then finally, make sure you hold that follow-up. Again, if you get to the end of that conversation where you followed up and they say, hey, we need more time to pray about it. Hey, can I check in with you in a couple days and see if you've had time to to hear from the Holy Spirit about how you might be a part of this. Make sure you hold follow-up, because once you lose that follow-up, it is really hard to get momentum again and to pick up the conversation. Becky and I had another friend who offered to give us $100. She looked at our handout and was like, yep, I already decided I want to give $100. I can do that. $100 a month. And she's like one of Becky's best friends. A week later, nothing. 2 weeks later, nothing. A month later, nothing. Every time she texted Becky, just like as a friend, like she was apologizing, like, I still haven't done that yet. I'm sorry. I'll get to it. So these people are people you typically have a relationship with. One of the reasons to hold follow-up is it doesn't interfere in your relationship. It actually got to the point for Becky with a couple of her friends that it was like the ongoing conversation every time she tried to talk to them on the phone or text with them. It was like, oh yeah, I know I said I was going to do this. I still haven't done it. My credit card got canceled, and so I'm still working on getting the new one. So make sure you set follow-up. It'll make it more comfortable for both you and them. We've learned a lot of painful stories in this arena, as you can tell. Sorry, I just froze up there for a second. So let's cover what that phone call looks like. When you call them to follow up, again, you might need to use Zoom or whatever technology is reasonable for this final conversation. Ask them if they've had time to pray and consider. If yes, they'll typically just tell you what their commitment is at that point. If no, then offer to reschedule a time. Like, oh, that's totally fine. Maybe we can catch up in 2 or 3 days, and you know, after you've had time to pray about this. Thank them for their commitment to give, or if they aren't giving, thank them for their time to meet with you and for their prayerfulness in that work. One of the things that we found helpful, and this might especially be helpful on Zoom, is offer to help walk them through the giving process. So, somebody says, yeah, I would love to give to you. I want to give $50 a month. Hey, do you have a minute or two? I would actually love, I can share my screen. I can actually go to the Global Outreach site and show you how to do that. Would you be interested in seeing that? Go to globaloutreach.org, type in your last name. Hey, do you see that? You see the picture of me on that page? Click on that. You're going to see the Give Now box. You can literally walk them through the process. Some people will say, oh, I don't have time to do that. Or no, I don't have internet access where I am, to be able to pull up a different screen. And if so, offer to follow up with them again 3 to 5 days later to ensure the gift is made. This is where we fell down on the one that I mentioned with Becky's friend. We didn't follow up that they had made the gift. It was like, oh yeah, sure, I'll do that. So set follow up. If somebody says, yeah, I'm going to do that. Oh, great. I'm gonna follow up with you in a few days just to make sure you didn't have any questions and to make sure that worked for you. Does that sound all right? Continue to hold follow up through this process so that it doesn't become awkward for you and them as you go. And then finally, hopefully you're all doing this, but we love the idea of sending a handwritten thank you note upon receiving your first gift, if possible. Again, for those of you in Bulgaria, maybe it's your Barnabas team could do that for you if it's somebody giving in the United States. But we love the idea of putting something personal in front of the donor. So you've had this conversation, they've given to you, you've had a great interaction throughout this entire process. They give a gift, pull out a generic note card, a thank you card, and just say, hey, I'm so excited that you've decided to join my team. Draghi, you mentioned this. What if somebody just wants to pray? Like, what if you're just asking somebody to pray? Send them a handwritten thank you card. Man, I love the fact that you've just committed to pray for me in my ministry. That is going to be so vital in this work, and I just want to say thank you for taking time to talk through that. This is a relational connection that Becky does exceptionally well on our behalf. She writes personal handwritten notes to people who haven't even given necessarily recently, and it just becomes such a personal connection to hear from you. So we would recommend using those, especially as you get new people to join your team. Some way to make the personal connection. If you can't do a handwritten thank you note, at least let it be a personal thank you email. So open your email, send them a personal direct thank you. Tell them the same thing you would in a thank you note. It doesn't have to be long or detailed. It's just a recognition of their giving and their generosity. Any questions about any of the part, but especially about the ask and follow up that we haven't had time to ask questions on yet? Again, Draghi.
I'm sorry. With today, I'm full with questions.
Oh, that's great.
Do you have like some made blurbs which you're using? For example, when you're getting a call, scheduling appointment or giving a follow up, for decision, some blurbs.
Yeah, you'll find some of those in Scott Morton's book. I'm blanking on the name of the book, but it was the book that we had you get pre-MOT. You'll find some of those script ideas in there, but what I would say in general is just be natural. So if it's my brother that I'm calling to follow up, it's probably going to sound a little bit like, "Hey, bro, have you found some time to talk to Carice about being part of our team?" It's not going to sound like that if I'm calling my parents' friends who I didn't know very well. So I'd say in general, just make it natural to that relationship that you have with them. But you will find some examples in the Morton book, by the way. He also, by the way, I'll note this, I didn't put this in my presentation. Scott Morton's website has a bunch of downloadable resources, including Bible studies, assignments. So go to his webpage. It's in his book. Go there and it has a bunch of downloadable resources that will lead you along in many of these ways, not only preparing, but how to execute some of these conversations as well. So I'd recommend that.